I love looking at art. I love living with art. And I guess when you live with art and when you spend a lot of time with the artworks, you have a better life. Also, when you collect, you interact with all the people that are involved in the art world. And by creating the collection, you can also potentially further the knowledge that we have of what happened at the time. I fell in love with really minimal and conceptual art, and I really started to focus on the 60s and the 70s and all the movements that took place at that time. And these are works that move me from an emotional point of view and that are also meaningful to me. You know, starting at the beginning of the 20th century, you really have a reaction against a lot of the art that was produced up until the 19th century, and this type of tabula rasa and the reinvention of forms, shapes, colors. You know what defines beauty. What is an artwork really? I mean, is it a painting? Is it a sculpture? Is it part of the architecture of a place? And from the beginning of the century up until today, but particularly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all these rules and all these concepts and all these ideas are changed and everything is redefined. I don't keep track of all the numbers, but my collection comprises probably a few hundred works. The collection is designed to have an impact now, and that's probably more important than the legacy in the future. And the impact now is about showing the work, is about explaining the work to people who don't know about it, and sharing both the visual impact, the emotional impact, but also sharing the knowledge. And so the legacy is today, in a way. There are works that you fall in love with, and there are also artists that you get into more than others. And if you look at the most important minimal or conceptual artists in the US, for example, I've always been more attracted to, let's say, Sol LeWitt and Fred Sandback than Donald Judd, for example. And that's a mixture of the visual impact of their work. It's a mixture of who they were, what they wrote. So you get into artists, I would say. You get into movements, then you get into artists, and then you get into the artwork. But for me, you really start with the artist, and then once you've gotten a feeling about the artist and what he's about, and you like his work, then you try to find the work that is really important and is really a very good illustration of what he wanted to do and what he wanted to say. And that, of course, I really like, and that, of course, that is available to purchase. Let's say if you take Sol LeWitt, rather than having lots of work, I try to look for the perfect structure from an early period, from '67, that was really a landmark step in his career in contemporary art, and then maybe one day wall drawing, and then these two things will make me happy. For me, the acquisition process is quite long and, I would say, detailed process. I try to meet the artist if he's still alive, go to his studio. For me, collecting is really a dialogue, and I don't do anything alone. So I work with someone that advises me, Sébastien Montabonnel, and he also works with a team of people, and they do a lot of research, I do a lot of research, and we debate things, we discuss things, we look at things together. And that dialogue brings a lot of knowledge, but it also brings a lot of perspective. And while I make the final decision, and it's my collection, it's really a collective work. My collection comprises works that you can easily display on a wall, and it comprises also a lot of installations that don't really fit into a normal house. But the whole purpose of the collection of the works is to be shown and the collection is to be shared. And every year I have probably between 7 and 15 works that travel around the world. Yeah, I mean, there is no geographic boundary to sharing the collection. So there is one work in my collection that I think has been shown in France, in Ireland, in Sweden, in Germany, and in Belgium. With regard to Sheffield, I mean, it's really a fantastic opportunity because the works will really go everywhere in the city. And I think from that you will get really a very broad engagement with the whole community in Sheffield. And we also get to show very different works from very different collections. And hopefully, you know, that will show artworks, but that will also show how people collect, how they collect differently, how they can bring different perspectives to the table. And one of the really exciting things about doing a show like Sheffield is it's going to be a new context, it's going to be a new way of putting works together that haven't necessarily been put together in the past. For example, we're showing at the same time very minimal and conceptual visual art and installations together with conceptual photography, which doesn't happen that often, and to me is a very important aspect of my collection, and it's something that people should really consider, the relationship between conceptual photography and the more traditional conceptual visual arts. I'm very curious to see what the reaction will be. I think it will be very interesting. My contemporary collection very much focuses on all the new grammar that was created in the world of art, in particular by conceptual and minimalist artists from the 50s and the 60s. And it's a lot of it relates to colors and forms, but also light, perception, and how an artwork gets off the wall and occupies the space. And therefore, a lot of the collection is really about architecture and is about how art integrates with architecture, becomes part of architecture, becomes architecture. I think the private collector is very important as a collector, and you know that's his first and foremost function. But it's I think there is a lot can be done also to create stronger relationships between the private collectors and the institutions and the public institutions and the artists. You know, the price of artworks has tended to go up recently. The budget of public institutions has tended to go down. So if you want to create events that are going to be of interest to the public, and if you want to show the best pieces, I think the cooperation with private collectors is required. The initiative in Sheffield is really interesting from that point of view because I think the perspective is very good. The quality of the work around the collectors, you know, should really be of interest to the community, and hopefully this can be, you know, a first step or an example from which other initiatives can also spring.